Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the KeenGamer podcast. I'm your host, Tristan, and I'm joined today by Ben. How's it going, dude?
Yeah, not bad. The sun's finally out here in London, which is quite nice. It's kind of
Uh,
just been raining for 2 weeks. So,
that must be like what? When does the sun come out there? Like once a year or something like that?
yeah, we have about 4 hours a year. So I'm spending it inside writing about video games.
Nice. That sounds very on brand with you. And it's been
Yeah.
a while since we've done a podcast together, so nice
Mm,
to finally get back together, catch up a little bit, and talk about video games. And we
definitely.
have quite the episode today, actually. So Netflix is reportedly going to get into video games. Yikes on that one, but we'll talk about that. And then Microsoft is going to be publishing every anything future Outer Worlds related, and we'll get into that. Ben, I know you're a huge Outer Worlds fan. You've talked about it many times in the podcast. And also, we'll be ending off on our main topic, which is all about influential people we really look up to in this industry. But let's get right into the news about Netflix, though, which is super bizarre, but I guess in some ways makes sense with how many giant tech companies are getting into games, stuff like that. I have an article pulled up from The Verge by Jay Peters. Netflix wants to hire an executive to oversee their gaming efforts, and the company is considering a bundle of games similar to like Apple Arcade like service. So basically, you'll basically have a bundle which will include licensed Netflix IP and games commissioned by indie studios. That's what they're going for. I think the original article was from The Information, and there was also another report from Axios, and I think there's something even from Polygon too. So it seems like it's pretty legit with how many different sources are getting different information and kind of piecing everything together. But Ben, what do you think about Netflix getting into video games?
I think it could be another horror story of a big media/tech company diving into a massively profitable business without really knowing what it's doing. But I feel a bit more like when I look at what Netflix has done with coming up as an independent thing, not under the banner of any other massive company, I have a bit more confidence that they're probably going to, tread lightly, not dive in with any misconceptions. But I would probably assume it's not going to go that well, at least at first.
I I agree. I think it's gonna honestly, I think it's gonna be a disaster. Like it's just that's been the trend. Like if you look at Google, they're like, all right, we're gonna do Stadia and we're gonna make video games. And then like or what was it earlier this year, they shut down all those studios and Jade
Mm.
Raymond was out and she started up her own studio. Good for her on jumping ship on that one. And then there's also like Amazon is they said they got that new CEO and he's like, yeah, we're sticking with games, and everyone's like, are you are you really?
Do you remember when they released a video game and then unreleased it and it's still unreleased? I can't remember what it was called, but it just was so bad that they were like, I'm gonna take this away from everybody, and now it's not out anymore.
Yeah, and then well, I know supposedly they're still gonna release that New World game that it's a MMO RPG
Oh
type of
yeah.
thing that by the premise sounds a little problematic with you settling in a new world, a little
Mm.
might be a little reminiscent to something that happened in history that is now the United States. um, but it's just like I don't know, it's just kind of been the trend. And
Mm.
but from what I've seen, it seems like the trend, whether it's Amazon, Google, or Disney, because Disney had Disney Active Studios, which shut down a few years ago, like I think 2016, 2017, somewhere in there. It's like I think the trend is they just get these executives who don't know anything about video games, like that's bad leadership, and then they just tank.
Mm.
If they can get someone really good on board, if they're really are really looking for an executive to oversee their gaming efforts. They need someone in the games industry who cares about video games. They can't just get some suit to just take the job like it's any other job, because people just don't understand this industry. Like they're like, oh, video games,
Mm.
I get that, yeah. And it's like, no, it's different. It's not like any other entertainment industry.
It
It's
is it
different.
is a weird industry, isn't it? And I think the issue is the idea that it to the outside it just looks very profitable. It's somewhere that a company can say we can make money here, let's get into this industry. But even from the inside, you see things happen like the Epic versus Apple case or the GameStop stock thing. And you have the conversations within, like, I don't know, video game Twitter, and you realize even like some of the, you know, top journalists in this industry all speak the same language in a way that I think outsiders would need to learn first. I remember when I started writing freelance about a year ago, and getting into that, I was like, this is a bit of a new language to me. And you know, I have to listen to podcasts more and really understand kind of, you realize that there's a ebb and flow to this that isn't really like anything else.
Yeah, there's that, like the conversation essentially, and like the language it's so different, but also just simply making a video game is not like making a movie where you spend like maybe pre-production's probably like a year and a half, maybe sometimes more. Sometimes movies get stuck in pre-production for years, but basically once you get into production, like once you're on set, like that's just like that's a few months or so, you know, like it's generally not like years of your life making something, and then you have like a I don't know, like a year and a half of post-production and the movie's out, you know. It's just like it's a relatively like short time frame usually, you know, if all things go well. But game development, like, it takes forever, you know. Like the reason Google stepped out of game development is they're like, wow, this is really hard and really expensive. It's like, yeah, duh, you know.
Yeah, and there's no easy way to roadmap it. Like games can like take 7 years or 1 year. Like an Assassin's Creed can be as big as The Witcher, but take 2 years because of the way that Ubisoft has their team set up and the engine they use and all these variables that in a film, obviously there's variables, but I guess it's just an older process of making something. Whereas just the engine you use can completely change your workflow and your timeline in a way that I like.
Yeah, there's at least there's a blueprint essentially for filmmaking, you know. There is not for video games. Like every game company does something different, you know. It's crazy, you know, and how much of a difference is, even to the point where you can have like someone who's just like, oh, I'm an artist at this company, but then someone can have a completely different job title, like that's like sort of the similar job but different at the same time. And it's like it's so complex, and it's science and art together, you know. And sure, there's a degree of that with filmmaking, but it's different still, like, you know. It's just different from making CG characters for a movie versus making a whole video game world and that's going to be interactive, you know. It's just like I don't have faith in Netflix whatsoever. They're a great company. They, you know, they put out great shows and movies and stuff like that, but maybe they should stay in their lane. I have very little hope for them.
Do you think that maybe they get gaming a bit better just because of, like in the article it does mention Castlevania, which I've heard amazing things about, and The Witcher, which I couldn't be less interested in, but I've heard good things about again. Like, do you think they're making good shows kind of tangentially based on video games? Do you think there's people there who get video games and get the audience because they've made successful shows for that audience? So maybe there's more there, because like you think about Apple Arcade, and Apple Arcade is really good and it works. I don't know how successful it's been, but it is a good service. And maybe that's just from what I know, it's because Apple's hired people in the industry and talked to people in the industry directly and worked with great people basically, and they've therefore understood it. Do you think Netflix already has some people on their side who get it because they're commissioning shows or they're buying shows like that?
That's totally possible. I've heard like a little bit of mixed things on The Witcher. I actually might end up watching it soon just because Henry Cavill. He's just like, how can I not watch it because of Henry Cavill? But I haven't watched Castlevania, but I hear nothing but excellent things. I actually just was talking to a friend about it like a couple nights ago, and so so I'll definitely have that on my watch list. But yeah, I think so. Like, I think that makes sense actually, that they have to have some people who are knowledgeable of video games. And they've done interactive related things. There was that Black Mirror special that they did too. That, you know, it wasn't necessarily a video game, but it was still an interactive experience. So they've kind of dabbled with what it's like to have an interactive form of entertainment. So there's potential. I will say that there is potential, and if this so-called executive that position they're trying to fill, if they can get someone really good who's like a legend in the industry to oversee things, I think they have a lot of potential. And also, if you compare them to Google, what have they done that's been successful or interesting in the last like decade? It's just like they keep coming up with like really cool ideas and then backing out or fails or whatever.
Mm.
Netflix though, they've been for the most part on a good stride of success. So
Mm. They,
hopefully
they, they,
that
led, they
they
led
can
the
keep.
way in streaming, didn't they? So
Yeah,
they could lead the way in a new kind of, streaming game system. Like Xbox isn't there yet. No one's there yet. No one's
yeah,
leading the way in that. So you never know who's gonna, come out the best.
yeah. So best of luck to them. My hopes are very, very low, but if they get someone good and like they like you said they can certainly adapt to video games like with Castlevania, which I hear nothing but fantastic things about. So maybe I'm super curious, and if they
Mm.
come up with something enticing enough, maybe you'll try it out. We'll see though. But let's get into the next piece of news, which I know you must be ecstatic to talk about, as Microsoft will be publishing future iterations of The Outer Worlds. I have an article pulled up from IGN by Adam Bankhurst. So Microsoft has officially taken over publishing rights for, quote, future iterations, unquote, of The Outer Worlds from Private Division, which arrives a day after actually Take-Two Interactive's president made a whole comment about how they're fully committed to the franchise, which makes it a little confusing. How are they going to be fully committed to the franchise when Microsoft is taking over publishing, since Microsoft does own Obsidian since 2018? Basically, from what we've gathered and from the article, essentially Private Division is still going to be attached just to market and publish the upcoming DLC that's coming for the Switch. And then everything from moving forward, they'll be giving everything away to Microsoft. So I don't know if Take Two is really committed to future installments, then they'll probably of the franchise and commit to the franchise. Then maybe we'll see what that means necessarily. Maybe a collaboration with Microsoft. But Ben, what do you think?
Um, on that Take Two thing, I think that they can't. I don't think there's anything to do with. I think they're just. This is something that the guy said to the investors
Yeah.
because the news wasn't out, and maybe he didn't know when the news was going to be out. Whatever, maybe there's miscommunication there. I don't think they're going to have any involvement. If anything that's released for the Outer Worlds in the future, which I assume would be a sequel, Microsoft's going to be completely in charge of that. I'm certain. Oh, Xbox.
I
I
agree.
kind of can't think of any way it goes any differently. But I mean, I like the sound of it. I think it's good to kind of fold into Microsoft's kind of stuff, because right now the Outer Worlds obviously isn't a Microsoft game or an Xbox game. It's just an Obsidian game that's on everything. And it's one of my favorite RPGs in ages. Like I really, really, really adore it. And I think if you have that, obviously Obsidian are making that kind of Skyrim looking fantasy game, but if you have the Outer Worlds in there as well, I think like it just would be one of the highlights in the library, even alongside Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 and whatever else ends up being in there. So yeah, I'm happy with it. I think Microsoft will do good things with it.
Yeah, it's just the constant conversation about Microsoft being like, "Hey, you have the great services, but where are the great games?" And hopefully, this is just another entry in their catalog of good games that they're going to be putting out.
Mm.
Whether they'll be making it multi-platform or exclusive. They even said it's going to be a case-by-case basis. I know there's reports that we talked about last week on the podcast with Annika and I about how Starfield is reportedly going to be an exclusive.
Mm.
And so I think they'll do great things with it, I think, regardless. But do you think they'll make The Outer Worlds 2 an exclusive, or do you think they'll just have it on everything?
I assume they'd make it an exclusive, or maybe just have it on Switch if they've seen success there. Although they should try and make it look better next time. Um, but yeah, maybe. I think the only thing I've been thinking about this is if it's a new IP, Microsoft is going to own it, and it's going to be a Microsoft IP in the way it's marketed and it's seen, and it's just going to exist on Game Pass. So that can include streaming and all that. But I think if it's an old IP, they may think differently. I don't. Maybe I I think it's such early days right now, and the only time we ever find anything out is like Jeff Grubb screams something on Twitter, and you realize, oh, that thing that we probably thought was going to happen is basically confirmed now. So I don't know. I think I just wait for that to happen before I make any sweeping statements, because I'd assume they want to have exclusive games, but also how many exclusive games can they actually have? And actually, you know, how much of it is just adding on to nothing? If you already have Starfield and Elder Scrolls, do you need Obsidian's new RPG on top of all of that? To then, is that going to add even more value? I don't know where the line is, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen and what I think we're going to be mostly getting a lot of uh I think it would be new IP will be exclusive. I can't see like existing IP being exclusive. Maybe because the Outer Worlds is still relatively new, even if they put out a sequel. Whenever they put out a sequel, hopefully we get a sequel sooner rather than later, because I like the game too. I was really good. I would like to play an Outer Worlds too, but I wonder if because it's still so fresh, if they'll be like, let's make it an exclusive, or because it's already established on other platforms, they don't want to exclude anyone. So then they just do that, you know? It all depends on where the money lies, essentially. I don't know how the game is sold about 3 million copies, but I don't know where distributed that is. Like maybe one platform was actually really low and another one was really high. So it's hard to see, but they did, they really did push that game on for Xbox's side and stuff like that, so I would assume they probably had a good deal on it. And it was on Game Pass, right? And
yeah,
that's how I played it. I just played it on Game Pass. So, I'm going to be able to play a Outer Worlds sequel on Game Pass for free. So I'm totally down with that. I hope it's not an exclusive though, just because I just want people to be able to play games. I get exclusives, and exclusives are a good thing for certain reasons. But for something like this, I hope it's not an exclusive, just for the sake of other people, And we're so early, and like Microsoft has acquired so many companies in recent years, but it's only been it's been 2018 since they owned Obsidian. We haven't really seen the full breadth of what that means,
Yeah.
We still kind of just like, okay, they own them, but what does that mean for gamers? Like, does that mean Outer Worlds 2 is exclusive? Does that mean some other games can be exclusive, but Outer Worlds 2 is not going to be? Like, we just have to kind of wait and see. And it's like a little tedious being like, Microsoft owns all these companies now. What are they going to do with these companies? And we just have to wait and see until games start coming out, and then they start making announcements. Be like, hey, if we're putting out this game, this is the next Doom. This is a new IP from Bethesda, whatever. And this is where it's going to be available. And depending on your preference as a gamer, you probably are just going to be crossing your fingers, being like, I hope I could play this on PlayStation or Nintendo Switch or whatever. Or if you're an Xbox or PC person, you have Game Pass, then you can be like, okay, it doesn't matter to me. So,
I mean, I got sent a review code for the Outer Worlds on Switch. I played I finished the game for the review out of 10. It looks terrible. Like, it looks bad. There's this thing that happens in the Unreal Engine when it gets ported to Switch that everything looks like Play-Doh, and it's really bad. But I then played it again on Switch because of the nature of the Switch. I find it a nice place to play it, and then I'm playing it for the fourth time on Xbox on my Series X at the moment with the frame rate boost, and I kind of love that. I love the fact that the game is there somewhere else, even though I own an Xbox. And I think the difference between an Xbox and a PS4 is just the games and the controller. The difference between an Xbox and a Switch is huge. They're just different things. So I think I would understand going the Ori and the Will of the Wisps route of saying this is an Xbox thing, but it makes so much sense on a handheld, so we'll put it there as well. And I could see that as a policy for them with games that have been on the Switch before or have been on other consoles before. But I would be really surprised if they went, I think the only console they're not going to put anything on is PlayStation. I think they'll put it everywhere but PlayStation. That's what I think with every game. I just think it would be. I just think PlayStation will keep outselling them no matter what, unless they just say this is, 5 games you can play. Like the thing with the PlayStation is, I hear that, you know, Demon Souls comes out and I want a PS5, but then I'm going to see the Ratchet and Clank things, and then I'm going to see the Horizon Forbidden West things, and then I'll see God of War Ragnarok, and then I'll be like, okay, I have to buy a PS5, and these things like stack for me. So I think Xbox might be looking at it like that, but I just think they need to make sure there's a diverse range of games, because there is too much. You know, Obsidian and Bethesda RPGs are like 2 of the most similar styles in gaming. Like The Outer Worlds is a better version of Fallout, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's just the same thing though. So they do need to make sure that they offer things to other gamers at the same time, which I'm sure they will. But I just think it makes much more sense than to say we're a publisher that just ignores PlayStation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think yeah, it's all about strategy. It's all about like what makes sense for the X platform, you know, like because the Switch is so different. I think that's a easier call to make, you know, if you look at something and go, oh, that will work on Switch. Yeah, sure, we'll put that on there. But to make the decision of you're Phil Spencer and be like, all right, do we really want this on PlayStation, you know? So that is going to be, I think, a trickier answer to get, but regardless, I think it'll be super interesting to see moving forward where they go, because they have to stack themselves and things more on their side, because like you said, this year alone is so stacked on PlayStation's side, you know, in their favor. It's insane. Like, how can you compete with that? Well, you got to get exclusives out on your side immediately, and yeah, I think PlayStation's this generation is going to be ahead no matter what. But I think that's why Xbox has placed more effort on Game Pass and xCloud and all these service related things, because they know they're not going to outsell them on Xboxes. There's no way, you know?
Yeah.
And so they just have to kind of pivot their focus. And I think they can't focus too much on what PlayStation's doing, because I think that's just going to hurt them in the end. Because at this point, there's no way to compete. There's just no way, you know?
Yeah. And also, like, it took PlayStation a generation to build this reputation that they have now. And it's carried them forward into this generation. And they're doing really well, and they're building on that thing. And they know what they're doing there. And they're working really hard, and they've got a good strategy. Xbox won't have any sort of success until the end of this generation. Not success, any sort of like cachet or kind of big impression on just consumers as a name for 5-10 years. It takes a very long time, especially because games take a long time to make, but also just because you need to build that, and there needs to be word of mouth. And, you know, 3 years after The Outer Worlds 2 comes out, or Starfield, or some random IP that everybody is like, this is amazing, 3 years after that, you'll have people being like, well, I really wanted to play that game, and the Xbox is cheap now. And then they'll dive into the world of it. And like that stuff just takes a very long time. And like, I love my Xbox, but I use it for playing Yakuza on Game Pass, and playing indie games on Game Pass, and playing Hitman 3 at a high frame rate. Like, I don't think all I think about is how I'm missing out on Demon Souls. That's an issue, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like, it's tough. It's like, it's all about great games, and PlayStation right now, like you said, Demon Souls, it's phenomenal. It's probably one of the greatest games I've ever played in my life, you know. And I
don't tell me that, because I end up spending all my money on a PS5.
I actually saw this morning, like last week on the podcast, Annika and I were talking about how she's trying to get a PS5. She just got one, as she tweeted, I think yesterday. Yeah, so awesome. Congratulations to her. I think she said she's going to play Spider-Man Miles Morales first, which is an excellent choice. Yeah. And Ben, I hope just get, you know, like, it's going to be tough to get one, and you already have a Series X, so it's no rush, but it'll be worth it. Just make sure you get it eventually. You better get it eventually, because come on, Ratchet and Clank, God of War, all these games.
I got a new contract at work starting next month, and then I'm moving in July. So I think like August is when I can say, you know, I've got a paycheck, I've got like more money, and I'm in a new place, so I can, like, you know, have one in the living room, like the Xbox in my bedroom or whatever. I think that's when I'll look at it. Although I still think they're really hard to get in the UK. From what I've heard.
I think, well, they even said it's going to take about 2022 is when they're hoping to be able to make it a little bit catch up with the demand, essentially.
And they're still selling faster than PlayStation 4s as well. It's crazy.
It's wild. Yeah, dude. Seriously. But let's get to our main topic, though, all about influential people in the games industry. You kind of talked about Jeff Grubb, actually, which was would have been a good segue, but we're still in the middle of our conversation. So here's a abrupt transition here. But
Back.
yeah, but Ben, like who is someone you look up to in this industry, whether they're media, they're on the development side, whatever, like, anyone and anyone in games.
I have a lot of people I listen to and read. But I remember like my primary kind of influences for I just play games and listen to podcasts about them. I want to actually write about them. This guy called Tim Rogers, who does a lot of YouTube stuff nowadays. But I remember reading some of his reviews because I think I just saw something on Reddit or something about his nasty BioShock Infinite review that he wrote. That's incredibly long. And I remember reading that and just thinking, this guy's kind of writing like a half a diary. I don't know what it is. It's just funny what writing. It's very personal and very amusing, really well written. It just made me think, oh, actually, you can be really creative in writing about video games. So like, I remember reading that and then stuff with it. And then I found he was still doing stuff. And now I watch his videos and he's 41 and it's not old or anything, but I'm thinking like that's 20 years older than I am now, or just I watch videos, hour-long reviews of a 90s Japanese dating sim. And it makes me like really inspired that like, oh yeah, in 20 years I can do something like that is completely diving into a specific thing I love. Like that's kind of amazing. And I also quite like him or Jeff, somebody who has kind of suddenly recently had like a really big like fan base or recognition, I guess. Like Jeff Grubb's only just in the last few years suddenly being talked about a lot, and Tim Rogers suddenly had a massive Patreon thing. Like when that happens and you think, oh yeah, people just hang about in this industry for ages, there's not just the big stars. And even though, I love Kind of Funny, I love IGN stuff, there's like all these great creators out there who don't have any eyes on them. And I don't know, it's why I love the industry. And I think the examples of people suddenly bursting out is just quite exciting and inspiring.
Yeah, I don't know. You said Tim Rogers was his name, right?
Mm.
Yeah, I haven't heard about him. I'll have to check out his stuff. But like you mentioned though with Jeff Grubb, it's like it's pretty insane. Like he's like, it's almost like he's become like the new Jason Schreier, like where it's just like people just like he says something, people will go, "This is the truth. It's confirmed,"
Yeah.
But that's just you make your connections as a journalist, and people tell you things, you build trust and a bond with your sources, and then next thing you just know all the industry secrets.
Yeah.
And no, I just recently started following him and I've read some of his stuff because I think he works at GamesBeat, right? That's where he's at.
Yeah.
And yeah, tremendous journalism. Like that's a really good example of just hard hitting journalism in games. That's not always seen. I feel like it depends on kind of where you're looking and such. But if you look at even like content creators, like you said, Tim Roberts, it's just like it can be so inspiring to see how long someone's been in games, and be like, oh, I can make a living doing this, and I can do this for decades to come. And especially when it comes to like really like critical thinking stuff, like I'll have to check out this guy because the way you're describing his content, it's totally up my alley. I totally love stuff like that, and that's where my real passion is. It's like criticism or think pieces, stuff like that, to really like think deeper about a game and go beyond of just the surface of, oh, it's a fun game and that's it. It's just like, but to go further than that, especially like since I know you do a ton of reviews for KeenGamer and stuff like that. So it's clearly you're invested in that.
I never ever get to the high levels of critical, incision that I want to get to, but I try.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, you're just honing in on your craft, and that's what it's about. Yeah. Or that's what we're both doing, since we're not like working at a major outlet or making a living doing whatever, games journalism, games media, whatever you want to call it, but we're working towards it for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
At least for me, it's like I have to I look at it two different ways. I look at the more journalism side of things, but also I look at like a lot of the media and like that's more like content creation. But for me, it's like Jason Schreier is I'm a huge fan of. I know some people aren't the biggest fans of him and stuff like that. He easily blocks people on Twitter, and some people take issue and stuff like that.
Good for him. I felt like just good for him. He's got a personality. He's not an influencer. He's not a content creator. He's just got a personality, and he does great work. So block away.
Dude, his work's phenomenal. Like, he's broken some of the biggest stories in gaming in recent years, and like I really look up to him as like an aspiring journalist, and like what he does for this industry is incredible. Like he breaks out like, hey, this is a major issue, and I'm gonna break that news, and everyone's like talking about that piece of news.
And then studios actually changed. Like Rockstar, he's reported, 2 years after his report, things are supposedly changing there. Just because he decided to talk to people and write that. It's like, that's huge.
Like, yeah, he's bettering the industry. And also his books are fantastic. Blood, Sweat, and Pixels. And oh, you have it? Oh, there you go. I have it on my shelf.
I haven't got the new one. Because I've not finished this, I haven't got the new one.
I have the new one. Press Reset. It's really good. So for people who don't know, Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, that's more about each chapter is a different video game, and it's kind of just talks about, hey, making video games is really brutal. I'm gonna go talk to a bunch of developers on how brutal making a video game is, but Press Reset is basically what happens to you when you work at a studio and that studio shuts down, and it's actually, it kind of weaves together. Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, like, it's very individualized. Like, each chapter kind of stands alone, but this kind of weaves in and out because it's like you read about one chapter about one studio, and then someone from that studio goes to work at another studio, which is the next chapter is about, and then that studio closed down. So there's people who kind of connect it together and stuff like that, and it feels a little bit more cohesive of a story. But it's fantastic, and both of these books teach you so much about the industry. Even if someone's listening and you're not going to work for the industry, I recommend both of those books because I think it's important for just a casual gamer to learn about this industry, at least to have some degree of knowledge. Like the toxic, like gamers on Twitter or YouTube comments or whatever, who just have zero idea how things work, but will state a hard opinion and do it in a really mean and aggressive way is like, we've all seen it, or we've been targeted by it. Like I remember on my Last of Us 2 review, people being like, oh, Sony paid you for this. It's like, Sony paid.
But they said that to you.
Yeah. And I'm like,
that's hilarious.
I work on KeenGamer. We get a good amount of traffic and stuff like that, but we're a small website, who's going to pay a nobody? I'm a nobody games journalist who currently is still going to school, living with my parents. Why would they pay me for my opinion? My opinion means nothing to them.
Also, like, reviews don't make that big a difference to game sales as well. Like, good reviews, unless it's an unknown game. Like, The Last of Us Part 2 was going to sell as much as it did, even if it was given a 6 or 7 out of 10 from everybody. It just would have sold that much. Yeah. Like, they're not going to get a big, they'll probably sell 15 more copies if somebody gives it a good review. It's nonsense. Like, it's not worth them spending any money on.
And for those reviews that are going to actually sell people on it, it's because you gained a following, I look at Angry Joe on YouTube and like with his reviews and stuff like that, people follow him and look up to his criticism and like his opinions. And if he says a game's great, it might sell some people on it, but it's not going to break numbers. The only thing game reviews really do is companies will hold an incentive like, hey, if your Metacritic score is like an 85, then you get your bonus, Oh, it's an 84, I guess you're not going to get a bonus this year, So stuff like that happens, which sucks, but
that's really nasty.
It's really nasty, yeah. But it's like reviewers don't get paid, and also we don't, as games journalists, we don't make anything. Like even the guys who are actually working for these major outlets, they don't make a whole lot of money. It's just journalism.
we're talking about people we look up to, but the people we look up to still don't make really anything enough to live on. They just make enough.
Yeah, like unless they are like, I guess if you're working like a higher position in an outlet, you know, like I assume Jason Schreier is making good money just because he's at a pretty good higher position within a major outlet at Bloomberg. So you
And
know,
also his new book sold like crazy. Like
yeah, it's
really,
already
really well
within
selling.
days it was a New York Times bestseller. So
Yeah.
I'm sure he's not doing like amazing, but he's doing I think he's definitely doing better than the average games journalist out there. But
Yeah.
it's like
I think
people there's a lot of misconception.
Yeah, and also like games media doesn't really it's not a good way to make money. Like it's really bad. You have to churn out content and you have to have lists and you have to have 10 things about the outer worlds that you never knew about. Number 7 will shock you, and that's like it's just such trash. And you have to have a team of people to make stuff like that. And I make stuff like that. We all kind of have to dip our toes in where the views are. But like that's why I look up to people like Jason Schreier. Is they kind of do elevate it as a medium, because it's not games media's fault, but it's just very, very difficult to make money now as a company, as a media outlet, that you have to find different ways to do it. And therefore it leads you down a path of like kind of lower brow journalism, which isn't a bad thing. I'm not saying anything about it, but maybe less incisive, or like you're not going to spend 8 months on one article. Whereas Jason Schreier will do that and also write books that will educate you in the industry. Like, I don't know, that's quite like, I'm glad there's a very impactful person leading that charge and selling, loads of copies of a book that will teach people about things, because it will change perception. It will increase interest in media outlets. It will help them thrive rather than struggle. It will help people make more money. It will help people do better things. Like all of these, like there's so many positive externalities that will just ripple out of anything, like just education, because it's very hard to learn about this industry, and you kind of have to do it through half Twitter and half kind of assumption. You mostly read Twitter and you mostly play games and listen to devs talk about games and kind of guess your way through it. And then he'll write a book that will be like the ins and outs, and you're like, this is a clear kind of, curriculum that I can follow. And I think like, even if you don't care about games, just read it, because there's so much there always.
Yeah. It's
so
also just really well written, and it's really good,
Yeah.
I also like it's just, like when I look at people I look up to too, it's like so many of them were games journalists but aren't anymore, like, which makes sense because the money is crap. Not just with games, but just in journalism in general. But I look at Janet Garcia. She used to work at IGN, and within the last 6 months to a year, she left, and I was a content creator. She does like YouTube streams, stuff like that.
I think it was this year, actually.
It was this year. That's right.
Yeah.
And like, was it a couple weeks ago, Sydney Goodman also left IGN to become a content creator.
I didn't hear that.
Oh, really? Yeah, she has a whole YouTube channel, and like I think she does some streaming on Twitch, I think. So she left and is doing that, and she's doing content creation, and she's doing some freelance stuff too, actually. Or if you look at, you mentioned Kind of Funny. I'm a huge Kind of Funny fan too, and it's like the founders of that company, they were journalists. So you look at Greg Miller. That dude started his career working at a newspaper and then went to IGN, and then it's like now he's doing these videos, and they talk about like the industry and getting some more serious, deeper talk about it. But it's also, there will be videos of them, like him reviewing Oreos and like, fun little goofy things like that. And it's just like, that's the inspiring part to me, is like that I know I could, if I have a change of heart, I can then change what I want to do, and there's different doors being open on what I can do, streaming, YouTube, something else, whatever. And it's like, as long as I can work with video games, I'm happy, And
there's a lot of value in that. Like I think about Kind of Funny, and I don't really follow their stuff outside of the games daily. And in KFGD, it's just like their news reporters. It's like watching CNN or BBC or something. Yeah. Which I think is like great. And there's no other service like that out there, or no other service quite like it, of being like, here's your news. It's like a digest. and we'll get through
and
it.
then they kind
And
of
it's
discuss it like it's basically what we do when it comes to our news section, and that's what inspired me. That's why I do the news section. The way we do it is because of Kind of Funny. I take that total template of, hey, this is the news story, and then I review what the news is. Then I ask you what it is, and we discuss it. Like that's straight up from Kind of Funny that I'm taking from.
And I feel like it's kind of like nice to see people break out and do different things successfully. So Kind of Funny did that. Kind of Funny was very like 5 years ago or something.
Yeah,
which is quite a big step. And their success was huge, considering that no one had really done it before. And then I think 2-3 years ago, there's 3 guys from IGN UK left and started a company called RKG, and they just do like let's play videos, but they're very unique. Like they make it into like a TV series, and they just did a playthrough of Sekiro. And like I've been watching their stuff because they used to do the show Prepare to Try on IGN, and because they're all from around England and Ireland, like they're really funny, but they also like the way they edit and design their shows. I've not seen anything quite like it, and they did it at IGN, and they just took that formula out and started, and now they have a successful Patreon for that as well. And I think their stuff's like excellent way of like playing a video game, and they found a niche and they've created it. And I just think like that can only be healthy for the industry to say, hey, here's another person who's really good at doing something specific, and they can be successful, rather than everybody thinking you're either an influencer who tweets stuff and is on podcasts, or you are at IGN or GameSpot. Like I like the fact that we can diversify, have different things for different people. Like I don't know what this Tim Rogers guy who makes enough money on Patreon to live, or I know he's doing okay, makes a 6-hour video review of a 90s Japanese dating sim. Like there's no other way I would get that content if it wasn't for the fact that people can diversify, people can find audiences, and I think it's just better for everybody. But I do wonder where the limit is. How many Patreons can there be before people just stop noticing?
Yeah, it's the dangerous part. It's like you're relying on basically subscribers essentially, to pay you. So that is kind of like there's a risk to it. There's a risk to both sides of it, and both sides generally aren't going to pay like that great, whether you're content creation or media. And then you get these weird hybrids. Like Kind of Funny, even they don't know how to describe themselves because they're both media and content creators, And I think I've seen that a lot. Like even if I mentioned Sydney Goodman and Janet Garcia with their YouTube channels, they're doing the same thing. Or even Alana Pierce, I know she's working at Sony Santa Monica, but she still has a successful YouTube channel. But all 3 of those women, if you look at their content on their YouTube channels, it's content creation, like Let's Plays and little fun videos and stuff like that. But they're also like talking about major things in the industry, news or, whatever. And it's like an interesting hybrid where we've seen the last like 5 years. And I think Kind of Funny helped open that door of being like, hey, you can do both. Like, why don't you talk about the news? But also then you have this hilarious video where you're taking shots every time you die in Dark Souls, or something like that, And it's just like, it's interesting how the worlds have collided. And it's great though. It's great for people like us, because now we have more options than ever to go into places, and we look at what these people do and we go, oh, I could do that. Or, maybe like one of those people are hiring, and then you go, oh, okay, I can join Kind of Funny. I can join this or that. It's not just GameSpot, gamesindustry.biz, IGN, all the gaming sites, which are all great. And, maybe I'll go work for one of those and that'd be awesome. But like, it's awesome that we have people breaking new ground, like Greg Miller, like who are just putting out these, making these companies and being like, oh, hey, no, you can, this wasn't just the path, the 2 paths. There's a 3rd path now. And this is what you can do. And it's like, oh, okay, I can do that, And
it's not just like, obviously we're thinking of wanting to make more money in the industry, get deeper into the industry. But I also think like content creators can really inspire on like a personal level. Like I first played Dark Souls because of the guys from RKG that I was talking about, the guys from IGN UK who made their own thing. And that's why I first played Dark Souls. And it's like now sort of kind of a staple of my gaming diet that I go back to all the time. Like, and speaking of that, kind of taking shots every time you die in Dark Souls, me and my old flatmate, when I got stuck on Honesty and Smell for the first ever playthrough of Dark Souls, did that exact thing, and we're up till 4 a.m. until we beat it. And like that moment in my life kind of only occurred because people made a video that entertained me, but also kind of made me think like, I don't know, make you feel part of something. I think there's so much value in like this kind of, especially after COVID, like this sense of community that these people can bring to this industry is like really valuable. And I think like it's easy for people to miss out on it and just think they're doing a job, but they're also like kind of reaching out to people who love the stuff that they do, and you know, maybe don't have any friends who love it. Like, you know, it's still feels like a nerdy niche thing to like. So it's really nice when like people inspire in that way.
Yeah, it's you use your platform in a positive way, you know.
Mm.
Like I look at Paris Lilly. I don't know if you follow him. He's appeared on Kind of Funny stuff and whatnot.
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of people probably know him.
He's
But
excellent. Like,
he's
I love
awesome.
Paris.
Like just super positive and like using his platform for something good, and like stuff like that is just so important. And that's what I want to do, whether I establish myself at a major, you know, outlet like IGN, or I do the more content creation stuff, whatever I end up doing within games, regardless, I want to use it for something positive, because games are something positive, you know, like it brings people together, you know, and I get to talk to awesome people about things I love. It's great.
That reminds me as well about another person who's seriously inspired me is Khalif Adams, who has appeared with stuff with Paris and done stuff on Kind of Funny every now and then. But he does the Spawn on Me podcast, which highlights, you know, underrepresented voices in the industry. He's been doing it for like 8 years, and I only became aware of it last year. And he's just one of the most excellent hosts, most excellent talkers I've ever heard. And he's just been going at it, and he's doing like such positive work in a way that like I don't see anybody else doing it in the same way, really. And like I think that's hugely inspiring, especially in an industry that can be quite closed off to underrepresented groups. It's really good to see. So shout out to Spawn on Me, and just go check that out, because it's just some of the best stuff. And like Khalif is like better than a lot of my favorite people in the industry just talking. Like he's so good at talking.
Yeah, man, there's so many people like you could go focus on, and I really encourage people to go do that. Like I think even if you're not going to work in this industry, I think it's nice to have, because one, you can gain knowledge about the industry and stuff like that and learn a lot, but also it can bring you closer to the more positive sides of the community. You know, if you can find that person you really like, you know, and then follow their content and be a part of that community. And like a lot of these people like open up doors with that, you know, and you don't know where it's going to take you. It might inspire you to make your own stuff. You might be able to work with that person, you know, or even if it doesn't take you anywhere on a professional level, it's still on a personal level. It does so much, you know, and it
might inspire you to have 20 shots while playing Dark Souls, which would be amazing.
Yeah, it would be. And people should probably be careful and maybe take off a few shots from that and maybe do a little bit less.
Of course.
Get good so you don't die so much and you don't have to take so many shots. But Ben, this was a great talk, dude. Thank you so much. And we'll see you guys next time on the KeenGamer podcast every Thursday. Check it out on wherever you get your audio podcasts, or check it on YouTube for the video portion. Whatever you choose, we support you, and go play some video games. We'll talk to you later.